am so glad to see everybody's face, especially with COVID. Oh, it's so fun to see everybody. Hello, welcome. Thank you for coming. I can't wait to see you guys in person soon. I hope that happens ASAP. I think most of you guys know I'm Morgan Pratt. I'm the chapter head for the Huntington's Disease Society of America, Utah chapter. And so we have a partnership, as you guys know, with the University of Utah and the Center of Excellence. So I am so grateful to be here today. I don't know if you guys know this, but this is actually the first part of a 4-part series, because instead of having, one super long education day where we all kind of fall asleep halfway through, we decided to kind of separate it out so we could retain more knowledge, but also so you guys could pick and choose, which events you wanted to go to. So I'm just going to tell you super fast the schedule, just kind of briefly. On June 7th, get excited, we're doing armchair yoga. So this is yoga for all body types. It's for everybody, even if you are in a wheelchair, it is for everybody, and we are so excited to do that. So that's June 7th at 6 p.m. A month later, on July 12th, we will be having a financial planning class, kind of similar to what we chatted about last time with financial planning, but that'll be through Washington Mutual. And that will be at 6 p.m. And then a month later in August, we will be doing an art therapy session where everybody can come out, and we'll be doing some fun crafts. And so that is also for all ages. That's from kids to, kids. How is the Christmas song, from kids from 4 to 92, or however the Christmas song goes. So everybody is welcome to come to our art therapy class. We're so excited to see all of you. So without further ado, we're now going to pass it over to Megan. Megan Zorn, as most of you guys know, she is incredible. She has been helping out, here at the Center of Excellence, and she is awesome. So yes, take it away, Megan.
Well, thank you very much. So when we were sort of crafting this Education Day series, we wanted to kind of have things that were informative, but also practical. And we also wanted to get updated and, tune up our knowledge about Huntington's. And I thought we could actually use maybe a little bit of hopeful spin. I'll talk a little bit about sort of our disappointing news from the Roche and Wave trials, but I thought we might want to talk about a trial that is kind of just getting started and has a little, to get our spirits up a little bit and learn a little bit about kind of what's the newest, latest, and greatest. So Unicare was nice enough to come tonight. I didn't know that was going to happen until today, so that's great. We have Dr. Sarah Ying, and we have Edgar Vega from Unicare. And first, I think we were going to start with the video, and then you guys we're going to do a bit of a question and answer afterward. Is that kind of how we wanted to run things? I'm going to run the video. Hopefully this will play very nicely from my computer. And if not, I'm going to turn it over to Edgar to run from his computer. So someone yell at me or wave vigorously if it's not working. Movement disorders is fun. We give a lot of talks. What I've learned in COVID times is that very frequently the videos do not run the same way they look on my computer as to the audience. So someone will have to holler at me if it looks terrible. I've given many medical student lectures, and everyone looks like they have tics because they're running, they're all running at such a clip that nothing looks great. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started, and then I think it's about 17 minutes long, something like that, explaining a bit about the Unicare Huntington program, and then we'll go from there. So let me get going on sharing my screen. Let me get this video running, and then we should be able to rock and roll. Okay, let's see. Okay, hold on, guys. Share screen. We want, is that playing okay?
Yes. I don't see
Well,
it.
we just see your downloads folder right now.
Oh dear. Okay, hold on one sec. All right. Let's see. Not, you don't want that either. All righty. Let's go back. Apologize, guys. It's in kind of a weird spot. Stop my share. Okay. If I stop sharing, it's right there. Oh dear. Edgar, should I turn it over to you?
It's up
It's
to you,
playing on my
but
computer.
you can't.
Okay, I'm gonna make you a co-host because I think I have it downloaded in such a way that if I push the button, then it. Rebecca, you may have to make him a co-host actually.
I think I can do it. So,
He should be a co-host now.
Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know why it won't let me go straight there.
all right, we're good to go. I was just setting it up. Sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Okay. All right, here we go.
I was trying to figure out how I could do it otherwise. There we go.
Okay, perfect. And then I'm sharing sound, so this should play pretty well. Obviously, internet speeds, have a huge variance. So, if you have any questions or anything like that, you can always reach out and we can make this available to you. Okay.
I think the sound is not there.
Yeah, I'm not hearing it either.
I just muted myself. Okay, hold on one second, okay? I had hit the button, but I guess maybe it didn't. All right, this is where we're gonna restart again. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Edgar Vega, and I am the Senior Manager of Patient Advocacy. And today we're going to talk about our Huntington's disease focus trial, which is named the HD Gene TRX1 trial. But before we do that, and we introduce Dr. Sarah Ying, we actually wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about Unicare, and then also introduce you to our patient advocacy team here at the company. So Unicare, has been around for 20 years, and we have over 20 years in developing what we call AAV gene therapy, which is adeno-associated virus gene therapy. And so we have an office where all of our research and development is done, which is in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. And that office has been actually around for over 20 years. But then all the development and manufacturing of the actual products are done, just outside the Boston area in a city called Lexington, Massachusetts. And so we were actually super excited because we did launch one of the first gene therapies in the Western world. And so we take all that knowledge, of 20 plus research and apply that, to different, disease areas, with the main focus currently being on Huntington's disease, through our clinical trial. And so, in those 20 plus years of research, we also, are fortunate enough to be able to work with those communities that exist, surrounding those different disease states. And in Huntington's disease, we've been, very fortunate to really try to understand the impact of the disease by engaging with the community, right? So in different, events that you may see us at, whether it was in person, or virtual over the last year, we've been super fortunate to, get to know most of you. And if we haven't done that in person, we hope to do that at some point. But then we'll actually take those conversations that we have, right? And help us, shape internal programs, right? To make sure that patient voice is heard throughout everything that we kind of do, and it could be something as simple as like, a piece of collateral that we create, that you take with you, to something, super impactful as making an update to a clinical trial. And then we actually try to create opportunities for that patient voice to be heard directly, right? Via, internal patient speakers and patient advisory boards. And as you can see here, some of the pictures, that we have been so fortunate to share, with you all as well. And one of the things that I really like to highlight, for us internally is that we take, that information and we actually are able to share with, the company internally, right? So if it's a scientist that is working on, some sort of vector development, but sometimes doesn't see the potential impact that they can have of what they're working on, that they can understand, like, they might not see the impact at this moment in time, but within a couple of years, they could see, the impact of the vector that they're working on. Our patient advocacy team is small, so we always, say an N of 2, which is a number of 2. And so Daniel Leonard, which, most of you may know, is our Senior Director of Global Patient Advocacy. So he has responsibilities, throughout the globe. And then, there's me, which is, I'm the Senior Manager of Patient Advocacy, and I have responsibilities within the US and North America. And so we're super excited to try to, create those connections, with you all, as our clinical trial advances, and hope to see you, in person soon at some point in time. But, whether it's a scientist, whether it's our patient advocacy team, ultimately our mission is to deliver, one-time treatments to hopefully transform those patients, patients' lives, right? So whether it's our hemophilia program or currently our Huntington's disease programs, like that's what drives us, and that's what makes us, go out and work for these communities every day, and with the hope of transforming patients' lives, as much as possible. And so with that, thank you very much for your time. I'd like to introduce Dr. Sarah Ying.
Hello, my name is Sarah Ying, and I'm the Senior Director of Clinical Development for the Huntington's Disease Program here at Unicare. I'm really excited to be able to share our work on the HD GeneTrix-1 clinical trial. For those diseases where there is a genetic link, gene therapy represents a very promising therapeutic approach. Gene therapy is defined as a technique that uses genetic material to treat or prevent disease. First, we have to figure out how to get the treatment to where it needs to go. Now, viruses already do exactly that. They find specific cells and inject their genetic material. So what our scientists have done is to modify a viral capsid so that it delivers our therapeutic genetic material instead of the usual viral DNA. The viral capsid can be compared to a box that might be delivered to your door. Then the scientists have packaged the therapeutic genetic material into an expression cassette, which is like an instruction manual or a recipe book. Once the patient receives the package, then the patient has the instructions, so the patient's own body can continually produce the therapeutic molecule encoded in the DNA expression cassette. In the case of brain diseases, if the gene therapy is delivered to the brain, then the brain itself can be the factory that produces the therapy to correct the genetic defect. For HD, Unicare is developing a gene therapy approach to reduce the amount of mutant Huntington protein. As this audience knows well, the cause of HD is a mutation in the Huntington gene. With increased CAG repeats, the mutant Huntington mRNA produces a mutant protein. This leads to clumping of proteins and degeneration of neurons across the brain. This degeneration is particularly concentrated in certain brain areas, which in turn is associated with the symptoms of the disease. Unicare's gene therapy approach aims to reduce the amount of HTT mRNA, thereby reducing the amount of toxic HTT protein, aggregation, and neurodegeneration. The gene therapy is based on the box, AAV5, and the instructions, an artificial microRNA against HTT, or MIHTT, and has the company name of AMT-130. Let's take a closer look at AMT-130. The clinical trial Unicare is conducting in HD uses a gene therapy known as AMT-130. This investigational treatment is the first one-time administered gene therapy to enter clinical testing for the treatment of HD. AMT-130 is administered only once by a neurosurgical procedure. There are two key components to AMT-130, an AAV5 vector and a gene encoding a microRNA. The vector acts as a delivery system and is based on a non-disease-causing adeno-associated virus, or AAV5, that has been changed to carry and deliver a gene encoding a microRNA that will recognize, bind, and non-selectively lower the human Huntington protein. MicroRNA, or miRNA, are small pieces of genetic material that can prevent production of a given protein. To non-selectively lower human Huntington protein means that production of both the disease-causing mutant, mHTT, and normal Huntington protein, HTT, will be decreased. The trial uses the same technique used for almost a decade by neurosurgeons experienced in delivering AAV vectors to the deep gray matter, including the head of the caudate and the putamen. The animation shows the brain with the left hemisphere removed to show the deep gray matter structures in tan and the CSF-filled lateral ventricles in light blue. The neurosurgeons will fill the head of the caudate with AMT-130 and then infuse the putamen twice. This volume is immediately distributed to fill 70% of the deep gray matter structures. Then, MIHTT is released in extracellular vesicles and transported to cortical areas and other gray matter structures involved in the neuropathology of Huntington disease. The main purpose of this study is to find a safe dose of AMT-130 in adults who have tested positive for the HD gene and who have early-stage HD. The study will also look at how the body processes AMT-130 and will explore how AMT-130 might affect how the disease progresses. The therapeutic goal is to inhibit the production of the mHTT by using AAV to deliver genes encoding microRNAs directly to the brain for non-selective lowering of the Huntington protein. Ultimately, what we'd like to learn is if AMT-130 can lower Huntington protein levels. It would be hard to expect restoration of function once it is already lost, but ideally, this approach of lowering Huntington protein levels could slow the progression of Huntington's disease. So we're calling the first gene therapy study HD GeneTrix 1. The objectives of this phase 1-2 clinical trial are to assess the safety, tolerability, and efficacy of AMT-130 in patients with HD using a dose-escalating, randomized, and double-blinded control design. The inclusion criteria include, but are not limited to, patients with a definitive clinical diagnosis of early manifest stage 1, HD, genotype of 40 CAG repeats or greater in the Huntington gene, between the ages of 25 to 65 years old. Several clinical sites are open and recruiting in the United States. Please note that participants will need to be off any other experimental agents for 60 days prior to enrollment. Previous exposure to gene therapy, Huntington lowering strategies, or experimental brain surgery are prohibited. It is important to reiterate that AMT-130 is administered only once. The study is testing 2 dose levels of AMT-130, low dose and high dose. The safety of the low dose will be assessed before testing the high dose. A total of 26 patients will be enrolled. Of the 26 patients enrolled, 16 will receive treatment with AMT-130, the treated group, and 10 will not receive any study treatment, imitation group. Patients assigned to the treated group will receive the dose of AMT-130 during a neurosurgical visit. AMT-130 will be infused into 2 specific brain regions, caudate and putamen, under general anesthesia. This is done by drilling 2 to 6 small holes in the skull and administering AMT-130 by a microcatheter. For patients assigned to the imitation group, similar scalp incisions will be made under general anesthesia, and the patient will remain as if the full administration procedure were being performed. But no holes will be drilled into the surface of the skull, and they will not receive a dose of AMT-130. The main part of the study lasts for 12 months, with additional annual visits out to 5 years for continued safety follow-up. Procedures will include clinic visits, assessments of physical and neurological health, a neurosurgical procedure, lumbar punctures, LPs, brain scans, and samples from body fluids. The study is double-blinded, meaning neither the patient nor the investigator or clinical staff will know if the patient is in the treated group or in the imitation group. It is Unicare's intent to give patients who are randomized into the imitation group and successfully complete the trial out to 12 months the choice to enroll in an open-label extension study in which they are guaranteed to receive AMT-130. This can only be done if the FDA and the Study Monitoring Board review the safety and efficacy data collected in the first 12 months of the trial and deem it acceptable to proceed. So this is the first study in humans testing AMT-130 gene therapy. Currently, there is no information on the long-term side effects of AMT-130 in humans. AMT-130 has been studied in animals. The doses in this study are based on doses given to animals and were found to be generally safe. Some AAV vectors have been approved for clinical use and are being used in several gene therapy clinical trials. In general, AAV vectors are considered safe. Risks that should be considered are the following. Treatment with gene therapy is permanent and cannot be removed once administered. AMT-130 lowers both normal and mutant Huntington protein in animals. The effects of lowering normal and mutant Huntington protein levels in adults are currently unknown. Patients may be ineligible to receive another gene therapy treatment after receiving AMT-130. Because AMT-130 is investigational, there may be risks or side effects that are not known at this time. There may be rare or unknown side effects, including reactions that may be life-threatening. AMT-130 is delivered directly to the brain and will include risks associated with general anesthesia and microcatheter placement in the brain. Please feel free to contact our study team or your local clinical trial site with questions about gene therapy in general or our HD GeneTrix-1 study in particular. It has been a really exciting year for AMT-130. In April 2021, Unicare announced completion of enrollment in the first cohort of the phase 1/2 clinical trial of the AMT-130 study for the treatment of Huntington's disease. A total of 10 patients have been enrolled in the study thus far, including 6 patients treated with AMT-130 and 4 patients who received imitation surgery. Enrollment of the second dose cohort in HD GeneTrix 1 is expected to begin in the third quarter of 2021. Unicare also announced plans to initiate a second clinical study of AMT-130 in Europe in the second half of 2021. This will be called HD GeneTrix 2. We are so grateful to all our investigators, our collaborators, and especially all patients, their family, and friends. Everyone has poured their hearts and souls into this study so that we can all better understand the effect of AMT-130 on Huntington's disease. Here is the contact information for our sites in alphabetical order by state. The first 5 are at the University of California, San Francisco, Rush University in Chicago, Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston, and the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Our next 5 sites are at the Ohio State University in Columbus, Vanderbilt University in Nashville, University of Texas, Houston, Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, and University of Washington in Seattle. If you or someone that you know might be interested in participating in our study in the United States, please do reach out to our clinical trial sites. And for the most up-to-date information on trial sites, please visit hdtrialfinder.org, clinicaltrials.gov, or write to us directly at AMT130_clinical_trials at unicare.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for presenting. I think we're going to open it up now to any questions from the crowd.
I'm going to suggest that if you have questions and your video is on, you can wave and we'll unmute you, or you could type into the chat so we can call on you and we can individually unmute you.
Oh, Dr. Ying, let's unmute you.
Okay, no, I was just saying that thanks for everyone for coming tonight. And you know, we're here and we're happy to tell you answer any burning questions you may be having about our study or clinical trials in general. It's just really sort of like it's really exciting to be able to actually join these conferences because you know, thanks to Zoom and this situation that we're finding ourselves in. So it's
some
like
things have gotten
super
a lot better. I mean, I think we used to, you know, run a monthly support group and only a certain amount of people could join because of distance. And we have a pretty large catchment area at the University of Utah. We see patients. I see some of my Idaho friends here. We see people from Montana. We see people from kind of all over, you know, a 6-hour drive away or so. So we have a pretty good catchment area. We have a really pretty active research population too. Our patients are very interested in research opportunities. And we have Kendra is one of my research coordinators. She's here right now. We've got, you know, we've had several Huntington trials, and she's in charge of our enroll group. And we've got, she could tell you exactly, somewhere in the 150, you know, participant, you know, numbers there. So we've got a really active group, and I think, you know, in general, very interested in research. And I just wanted the people to sort of hear sort of what they, you know, after we had sort of disappointing news from Roche and Wave, sort of what maybe the next strategy to target the mutant Huntington gene and mutant Huntington protein, so that we could sort of see sort of what the next steps are, you know, from that not being kind of what we had hoped. And we had really put a lot of hope, future hope onto kind of what the next group was. Did someone have their hand up? But
it looks like I see a hand.
Oh, Morgan, we got to unmute you. Uh-oh.
Still muted.
Sorry. Thank you so much for presenting, Sarah. I super appreciate it. So tell me how you guys are responding to COVID and how is that affecting the study?
Oh my goodness. And COVID has changed the entire, the world as we know it, and it certainly changed research as well. And the studies are going forward, although there are certainly a lot more precautions that have to be taken. And so, actually, our first surgeries were actually scheduled to be done in March. And you remember that month. That's when everything shut down. And so they didn't actually get started up for another couple of months. So now how things are going are some of the patients do have to quarantine when they go to a surgical site. Sometimes they'll have to go there a few days in advance, not only for the pre-surgical evaluation, but also just for the COVID testing. We'll see how these regulations start to change. Everything is based on sort of the policies of the individual site. But traveling has been, as you know, a lot of people have been reluctant to travel, but the research has gone forward, and so the people they've flown for their surgeries, they've flown for their follow-ups, and so what we really appreciate is the dedication of the patients and their families and everybody in sort of coming together to make all of this happen despite what's happening. And so we're hoping, now that, vaccines are going around and everybody's getting out and about more, I'm seeing the traffic pick up a little bit more when we're out on the highway already. And so we hope this bodes well for the study and for everyone.
Great question, Morgan.
I have a quick question and comment first. Thanks for coming here personally, Dr. Ying, and also Edgar, for presenting personally to us. We really appreciate that. And it's cool. The stuff you guys are doing is so high tech and so cool, the way you've hijacked an innocuous virus to do good instead of harm, especially in the wake of COVID. It's really cool stuff that you're doing. And honestly, I think a lot of us would love to be a part of it. And I just want to say, consider U of U as maybe a phase 2. Now, please tell me that after 12 months, we don't have to wait all 5 years before we move on to a phase 2.
So that's great. Thank you for your really kind words and your support. So this study is technically a phase 1/2, but everybody's looking for the big phase 3 study, and what we're gonna at the complete when we're done enrolling this first study. So this first study is going to have 26 patients in it. And we have already done the first cohort. That's the first 10 have already come through already. So thank you to, if there's anyone here who has already participated, thank you. Or if you know anybody, just thank you to everybody for your general support in making this happen. And we're in preparation to start addressing the next set of 16. When the results come back from those studies, that's when we decide to go to the phase 3. So nothing's fast. We're going slow and steady. We're being careful, but we're working at it, and we're working at it together.
Well, I'll put a plug in for our site. We have a truly excellent stereotactic neurosurgeon who's experienced administering AAPs for Parkinson's disease. So if and when that time comes, we're ready.
Please make it go faster if you possibly can. Please.
Make time go faster. We'll work on it. No, we're trying our best. And one of the things that's been really helpful is that actually, despite everything that's happening, the FDA has been very responsive, and in terms of and with our DSMBs, they've been very good about like getting together and meeting. So like as soon as the little bit, we wait 3 months or 1 month after the set of surgeries to move on to the next set. We're being very, very careful, but everybody's like, when they make the decision, it's always a go. So So thank you so much. Ooh, I think I saw some questions go by.
Yeah, it looks like there's a question for the animal study. What were some of the side effects from Natalie is asking that.
That's a great question. You know, the animals didn't say anything. Well, but no, all joking aside, the biggest things that we look for is when we inject the AAV, well, where does it go? And does it come out? You know, is there shedding? Do we find it? Does it stay in the brain? Does it go everywhere? And one of the things that we were pleased to find in the animal studies is that we inject directly into the striatum, and then it does tend to travel beyond the striatum to different parts of the brain, but it doesn't really go to the other parts of the body. So one of the things that you always worry about when you're injecting, it's a virus, right? But you know, even though it's been engineered so it doesn't go other places, does it in fact get anywhere? And it actually looks like it's behaving nicely, and it stays where you've injected it, or maybe if it travels down the neurons, you know, either forward or backward, anterograde or retrograde to different areas of the brain. But so far we haven't seen any major effects. And the other thing that we do worry about is, does the body raise a large reaction to this? And there hasn't been anything that has caused any concern so far. So that's a great question.
And luckily there have been other trials in other disease states in the past that I'm sure that Unicare and other companies working on this strategy have kind of learned. I went to a really great talk from a stereotactic surgeon from UCSF, and he was talking about how they have altered the catheters over time and how they've learned to sort of inject as they're moving the needle to get better coverage areas. Because initially when they were placing some of these injections in, they were seeing that they weren't getting the coverage that they were looking for. So they've learned a lot about kind of how to do it, you know, the technical pieces. And you guys are nodding along. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. And, you know, learned a lot from sort of how to inject things to get good coverage in those areas that we're looking at. It's, you know, not as easy. It's a very small, very technical procedure, but the surgeons who do it know what they're doing.
Yeah, they're fantastic, and I'm glad you had the shout out to UCSF because they're wonderful.
Yeah.
They've developed a lot of new methodology, one of which is the convection enhanced delivery.
Yes.
In which what they do is they actually gradually pulse in the material, sort of in sometimes even in response to like what is the heartbeat, so it doesn't meet a lot of resistance. And so by not sort of like forcing it all in at once, it kind of gradually helps it get in a little bit better. As you mentioned, there's like advances to the catheters, and so there's one thing they use called a step catheter, in which in order to prevent, you know, you can imagine, you know, these are tiny holes. They're so small that you actually can't even feel them through the scalp after you've drilled the hole. And then but even though these holes are small and the catheters are even smaller, you worry about the fluid coming back. So they specially designed the shape of it so that it can't reflux backwards. And so there's sort of been all these little advances that have been coming along as they've been getting to know how to, what's a better placement, how do we use the equipment better. So everything is sort of state of the art. Everything's really very, very much cutting edge, but that also means that we're learning. And so thanks to everybody who's learning along with us.
And that's presumably why there's just 3 centers doing the surgical piece, so that you can keep the expertise kind of concentrated. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you. I think I saw another. Was there another hand or?
Oh yeah, from Morgan. How symptomatic do you have to be to participate?
That's a great question. So we have. So if you look at the criteria that we have on clinicaltrials.gov, they're not very specific but one of the things that we mention is that in terms of your CAG repeats, we're looking for 40 and above, and one of the and we have a TFC, your total functional capacity criterion. However, one of the things that we've noticed actually is people as one of the other criteria that people don't know before they enter the study is actually what is the volume of the striatum of that part of the brain that you're injecting into. And so it needs to be of a certain size for a couple of reasons. One, the neurosurgeons need to be able to safely inject into it and sort of know where they're going and that it's filling a particular area. And second of all, there needs to be enough sort of material left to inject into, knowing that there's going to be some material that's going to respond. And so one of the learnings that we had sort of early in this study was that actually we're going to have to go earlier and earlier. Like at first we were talking about enrolling patients who had stage 2, and maybe we were looking for patients who were entering faster. And if anybody who's been following clinicaltrials.gov, we were actually looking for people who had a higher repeat number in hopes of finding people who were progressing more quickly, but they were progressing too quickly. And so we're actually looking for very much early patients. And we found some of the patients, you know, are just even on the verge of becoming symptomatic. And then so it's been one of, so for the purposes of this study, the way we're trying to recruit more homogeneous. I mean, if the patients that we recruit are more similar to each other, we'll have a better understanding of what the process actually did. And so so the people that we're looking for are actually just on the verge of becoming, are just very, very early. And this has been, and so if you know people, you know, usually it's ironically, sometimes it's more difficult. A lot of people, there's so much life getting in the way, you know, you know, your jobs, your families and everything. And so we really appreciate these, you know, these people and everybody who takes the time out to participate in our studies.
Yeah, so I think if you think you could potentially be a participant, just to reach out to the trial folks, and then they can kind of go through the inclusion exclusion criteria with you. Sometimes then people get invited out, right? And then you go through the screening process, and at that point, you know, they can sort of tell you if you still remain, you know, if you sort of check every single little box on there that maybe isn't all on the clinicaltrials.gov website. You know, sometimes you get excluded because, you know, your iron is too low, or, you know, some other thing that they don't learn until they draw your blood or get the MRI scan.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Any other questions? I think that's it. I don't see any more hands or chats. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Yang and Edgar, for coming to our group. I'm hopeful to maybe whip through some other research updates before, if everybody can hang on for maybe another 20 minutes or so. I think because I can eliminate all the Unicare slides, I should be able to make it through the rest of my slides. But thank you guys so much for coming. And you guys are free to go. I don't think you probably want to hear the rest of this.
We do. Thank you so much for having us,
Okay.
everybody.
Awesome. Yeah,
Have
thank
a
you
good
very
night,
much.
everybody.
Thank you very much. Y'all have a good night. Okay. Nice to meet you. Hopefully we'll meet in
Bye.
person at some point. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Bye, y'all.
All right. I'm gonna hopefully make it through some of my other slides. I'm confident in sharing these, the rest of these. What were the issues of the other study? We haven't heard anything. Yeah, I'm gonna go through that for sure. So make it to screen sharing, and then we'll go from there. Okay. This should work. You guys can all see my screen here. It's very hard to make it into the other screen without messing things up, but let me see what I can, if I can get it into the full screen. You guys seeing my full screen now? Can you give me a thumbs up, Rebecca? Yeah? Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Sounds good. Perfect. All right. So the first thing I want to go over is just a little bit about what Hdsa does and how they support our mission. So basically, we're a Huntington Disease Center of Excellence site, and what that means is that we coordinate with Hdsa and run a lot of their programs. But Hdsa in general gives us, a lot of news about the HD drug pipeline, genetic treatments, other approaches. We're going to learn a little bit about observational research, and we're hoping to kind of cover all of that in this talk. So Hdsa really does work on several fronts. They are interested in clinical care, sort of helping us with our Center of Excellence sites. They're very interested in advocacy, so getting you guys involved and interested in the HD mission. Research, they help support a lot of research efforts. They provide a lot of educational resources, and they provide quite a bit of support. So there are a lot of different fingers out there in terms of what they do to help support research. And I'm just going to kind of whip through these. So let's go over some of the clinical trials. So it's important to remember that clinical trials go through a ton of different phases. So when we think about clinical trials, we start kind of in the drug discovery phase. Sometimes it's a drug that we already know about that maybe we're going to try to repurpose for another drug. Sometimes it's really just getting in there with ideas in the lab. Then there's this preclinical development, maybe, effects on animals and in cell cultures. And then eventually we get to human research, and that's that sort of blue bar there on there. But you can see how this it funnels down. There's so many things that don't even make it past that first little bit until we get to these sort of the stage 3 where we consider it clinical development. And then we go into these different phases of clinical trials, and the various stages are basically the first phase in clinical trials is really when we do human trials, very small amounts of people. We're looking to see, are they safe, and then we sort of look into these phase 2, phase 1/2, or does it really help? Is it reaching the target that it's hoping to reach? And then larger phase 3 are sort of, we consider the pivotal trials where we're looking for, can we get this approved for use in humans? And those are going to be larger amounts of people. And then we go into long-term safety. So like when we think about the COVID vaccines, they made it through all of these things, right? And then they get into the stage 3 trials, which had, for COVID, at least, 40,000 participants in some of these larger trials. And now they're in that long-term safety kind of phase where they're continuing to monitor those individuals long-term. So everyone in those original trials for the Pfizer, the Moderna, the Johnson & Johnson is still being monitored for safety as the FDA looks for the sort of beyond that emergency use authorization to get into full authorization. So they're already kind of in this bottom phase of the blue funnel. And then eventually we go into those long-term safety and patients can have those medications. So again, looking at phase 1 trials, these are very small. We're kind of in this, like, is this just safe in humans with small numbers of participants? Then we get into the phase 2 trials with larger amounts of subjects where we're looking at, is it safe and does it seem to reach target? Does it seem to be effective? And then the larger trials looking at those randomized, usually these are those randomized placebo-controlled trials where we're looking, can we get this drug approved for human use? There's lots of things in the HD pipeline, many drugs and drug companies that are working on HD strategies. Unfortunately, and we're going to talk about these, both the Wave and the Roche were halted early due to lack of efficacy. So we'll talk about that in just a sec. So again, most of the strategies these days are looking at trying to alter the way that the HD gene produces the HD protein, or trying to prevent it from producing that HD protein. So when people have the clinical picture of Huntington's disease, they have one copy of this gene that's expanded. We see that CAG repeating 40 times or more. And then for the reduced penetrance, 36 times or more. So we're trying to interrupt the production that gene makes this abnormal protein. So that's kind of what we're trying to do with a lot of these strategies. So again, they're trying to lower the amount of HD protein that gets made. And we think that HD protein is what's responsible for all the clumping in the brain, the destruction of certain cell types, the shrinkage in certain areas, and then the clinical picture and symptoms of Huntington's disease. So I'm just going to kind of go over that quickly. And again, lots of companies working on this. It's not, even though we got disappointing news from one company, 2 companies, there's so many other companies and so many other strategies that are in the pipeline. So I don't want people to give up. Although I mean, again, I share the disappointment. We were a site for the Roche trial, and it's extremely disappointing. And I can't thank the 9 participants that we had enough for being with us and going through that trial and being willing to be a participant in some of this this pivotal trial, this very exciting pivotal trial. I have lots to say, but I'm not going to share all my sad thoughts with you today. But again, lots of things to come, other companies, other strategies, and that's kind of the main message I wanted to give, especially with inviting Unicare here. So basically, the strategy with the Huntington and WAVE was that we were going to inject into the spinal fluid, into the intrathecal space, this thing called an antisense oligonucleotide, and the hope was that process and that treatment would reach the brain and give us a benefit in multiple different endpoints, and hopefully stop or slow progression of the disease. So basically what would happen is that drug would attach to the Huntington RNA and not allow it to make its protein product. And we had in that trial 791 participants at 100 plus sites in 18 different countries. So it was a huge trial. It was a huge undertaking for many sites. And in that trial, a third of the participants got the treatment every 8 weeks. A third of the participants got that treatment every 16 weeks. And a third of the participants got that treatment delivered, but no actual drug every time, every 8 weeks. So in late March 2020, this is 22, it should be late March 2021, Roche announced dosing had been stopped early. I got the news at the very same time that they announced it to the public. There's a lot of rules and regulations about kind of informing investigators, and basically because of insider trading rules, everybody learns the news at the same time. And they have done a couple of different efforts of outreach through Hdsa and other means to kind of explain why that trial was stopped early, and I'm going to go over it just in a tiny bit of detail. But basically, in the trial, participants were followed. We were, I think, 17 months into the trial, but there were participants at different phases at different sites in different countries and different cities. But basically, all the participants' daily function got worse over time. We expect progression of disease even in placebo participants, and they did see progression in all of the groups in the trial. So every single participant in general got slightly worse over time. Those who got the drug every 16 weeks and those who got no drug did about the same. The participants that got the drug every 8 weeks might have done just a little bit worse than the other group. And we're still learning, they're still diving into the data at this point to kind of better understand why that might be. So I don't have any great answers about that. The WAVE trial has a similar strategy where participants were injected with antisense oligonucleotide, except for in this trial, rather than targeting both the mutant and the wild type, or the sort of normal and abnormal gene. In this trial, they only targeted the mutant allele, and in this trial, they really didn't find that it lowered mutant Huntington at all. So they are planning a third trial. They say they have kind of an improved chemistry and improved strategy, and they're going to start later this year recruiting subjects for a subsequent trial. So it was disappointing news on kind of the ASO front at this point, but it looks, I know for a fact that Roche is going to be diving into the data more deeply to sort of better understand kind of what happened during that trial. And WAVE looks like they've already sort of regrouped and re-strategized, and looks like they're trying to find a new candidate for Huntington lowering. So in terms of, the Unicare, they already sort of went over that, but basically the difference is rather than getting injected with a treatment in the spinal fluid in the back, every so often, this would be a permanent injection into the brain. So I'm not going to go over that too much. There's just a couple slides about that. A couple other sort of exciting things. There are some oral medications that are in clinical trial now. There's a medication called branaplam, I'm hoping to pronounce that correctly, that was initially developed for a fatal childhood disease called SMA. If you might remember, SMA has an ASO or that's already been approved. But during those clinical trials, Novartis discovered that it also kind of lowered mutant Huntington. So now they're looking to test that drug that was originally for another condition in Huntington's disease, and they hope to begin phase 2 trials in late 2021. If a drug is sort of already approved in another disease state and it's repurposed to a different disease state, oftentimes those trials move a little bit more quickly because they've already sort of established safety in humans at that point. And then PTC for Therapeutics has a similar compound. It looks like they're hoping to enter trials in 2022. These are both oral, so just pill form, which I think a lot of people are excited about rather than injections into brains and infusions into spinal fluid. The biggest question, honestly, is like, do these things hit their target and do they do what they want to do? So hopefully we see some good news on those fronts. So again, the Huntington lowering trial summary, we're looking at Roche diving in deeper into their data. We're looking at Wave coming at us with a third trial, a newly designed ASO, and then we're looking at Unicare for these stereotactically delivered medications. There's another company called Voyager that has a very similar strategy to Unicare that's also planning their Huntington trials. Novartis for that repurposed drug in an oral formulation, and then PTC also with an oral Huntington lowering trial. So lots of things coming in the next 6 to 12 months. So still a really exciting time for Huntington's disease, and probably the most exciting time we've had for Huntington's disease is kind of in this last few years. So new things to come. This is just a summary slide of all those things. I was hoping to get you guys done at 8 o'clock, so I'm speaking really fast, but just a summary slide of everything I just mentioned. And then there's other clinical approaches. We're looking at new medications to help the chorea, the wiggly wobbly movements that people with HD have. There's a trial going on right now here in Utah. If anybody has chorea and is not already on a medication intended to treat chorea, they could potentially be a participant in the Nuriken trial. So I'll give Kendra's information a shout out for that one here in a second. Prolenia is another company looking at different ways that brain signaling may be occurring and has a therapeutic potentially in clinical trial for that. There's a company called Azavan who's we actually participated in their phase 1/2 trial for a compound for aggression and irritability, and that one was favorable in the very early trials. It's going to move on to a larger trial, they hope. There's a Sage Pharmaceuticals may have a compound for cognitive changes, and there was a VaxNext trial looking at whether they could affect brain inflammation. So this Nuriken trial, again, is called Connect HD. We are a site for this, looking at the safety and efficacy of a drug called valbenazine for Huntington chorea. It's a once daily treatment, similar to tetrabenazine and tetrabenazine that are already approved. But again, to be in this trial, you have to not already be treated for your chorea currently, which is tricky because we have not found a person who has bothersome enough chorea to want to be in a clinical trial for it, but is not yet already taking something for it. So if you know anybody who fits this bill, I'll give you Kendra's information in just a minute. And again, it's a once daily treatment. The trial just has 12 weeks of active treatment. There's quite a few visits to Utah, so keep that in mind. Kendra can tell you if you contact her everything you could possibly want to know about it. They're hoping to recruit 120 participants that have Huntington's disease but can walk unassisted. And here's Kendra's information. I'll leave this up for just a second. Kendra, you can raise your hand at the end if I got your phone number, if the phone number's changed since you moved to your office. And that's her stuff. We can post this at the end too if people are interested. I've got another slide with a different trial with her information coming up. So Prolenia is looking at this medication called Prodopidine. We were a site for this earlier trial of Prodopidine also. It did not meet its clinical endpoint, but during that trial, they felt like they saw a signal towards improvement in some daily function activities. So they're going to restudy it with different endpoints. So there's a lot of, there are going to be a lot of sites in the US. They're hoping to enroll 480 participants, about 18 months, and then hopefully an open label after that. And then again, these other trials, in October 2020, the phase 2 looked at aggressive outbursts in Huntington's. It seemed to be well tolerated and seemed to be slightly effective. So they're going to plan a larger trial to further investigate that. Sage Therapeutics is hoping to plan a larger trial to combat thinking impairments and Huntington's disease. In a very small trial, it looked safe in a 2-week study. So they're hoping to develop a larger trial. And then Vaccinax did not meet its key clinical goals. So that study, that compound is kind of done. But again, lots of trials, and because they don't actually do what we are hoping to do. So that's the purpose of doing clinical trials, is to really determine whether things are safe, effective, and tolerated in human beings. So we really thank our participants wholeheartedly for participating and giving the rest of us the information that we need to move forward. So observational trials, Enroll HD. Who doesn't want to participate in Enroll HD? If you're not participating, you should. I encourage every single person who comes through a Huntington family or who is at risk for Huntington's, has symptoms, has been tested, has not been tested, to participate. Basically, you come in once a year, you meet with Kendra, who is lovely, and you meet with me. We do some health questions. We go over some questions about memory and behavior and feelings and lifestyle. I do a neurological exam. You do get a test, which does do the genetic test, but there's no way that you can find out whether you have the gene or not, or I can find out, or Kendra can find out, or anybody. That information is kept separately. So if you have not yet been tested, you don't want to know, you won't find out from this trial. And if you do want to know, you have to get tested separately. Travel support is available. We give you a small stipend for coming, and it's really pretty painless. Kendra and I like to have a lot of fun and chat with our patients. And the purpose of this trial, honestly, is to learn more about Huntington's as it is in living human beings over time. It's hoping to better improve the design of clinical trials to give us a better understanding of kind of natural progression. And then hopefully we get more drug developments and eventually a cure for this thing. So that's kind of the purpose of Enroll. There's no treatment as part of it. It's simply an observational trial. We've been a site, I think, for at least 10 years. So I have patients that have come in annually for at least that long. And again, we're really trying to learn more about Huntington's as it is in humans, and to hopefully speed therapeutics to the population. So Enroll HD hopes to magnet, larger companies, drug companies, to be able to help use the data that comes from Enroll to better design clinical trials. So these are all kind of the companies that have benefited from patients participating in Enroll. There are sites basically everywhere for Enroll. They're also looking at the Roche Natural History Study, kind of in conjunction with Enroll. So we are not a site for that, but Rocky Mountain is for the natural history study. I believe it's completely enrolled, so it's not something that people can still get into. Basically, Enroll is really looking for people that are kind of in that pre-symptomatic phase or early symptomatic phase, so we can learn more about how things evolve over time. Because Huntington's, is diagnosed kind of after symptoms appear, and then as they kind of worsen over time. But they're hoping, if we can identify patients in that pre-symptomatic phase, we can sort of design better therapeutics to help lengthen that pre-symptomatic phase or even slow down disease progression. So what we learn from Enroll may help those disease-modifying therapies be developed and be able to be validated against kind of the normal progression of the disease. So ultimately, we want therapy that prevents symptoms kind of forever, and we can't do treatments that last kind of the whole lifetime. So Enroll is going to help us better understand how to target these therapies and how to design these therapies to hopefully stop, slow down, halt, eventually, hopefully cure Huntington's disease. So right now they're really trying to recruit people who are pre-symptomatic. So if you have a parent that has Huntington's disease, you don't have any symptoms at all, or you are currently asymptomatic, that's really who they're trying to recruit. We will take anybody, but that's kind of the big focus. We can learn, that's the group that they feel like they can learn the most from at this point. So the folks before they're symptomatic, so they can follow them over time. And again, they're really trying to learn more about, why onset varies person to person. We know at certain repeat lengths, people are expected to have symptoms at certain times. On this graph, you can see, people with a repeat length of 40 may have onset in their 20s, and they may have onset in their 80s. Why? Why does that one repeat length give us different ages of onset? Are there certain modifier genes that are responsible for the variance in age of onset? And so Enroll is really looking at that kind of a strategy as well. So how do you get involved? Well, again, you can call Kendra. She can get you into this trial, this observational trial. It's again really very painless. It just requires annual visits, and it's also a good place if people have a Huntington family history and they're not really ready to see me as a patient or see someone as a patient. They're not really ready to make the decision to test or not test, but want to come in and really just talk about things. This is a great place to do that. I'm happy to, as part of that clinical visit, really just answer questions. And it doesn't go into your medical record at all. We don't say, Huntington family and put that in your medical record. It's just that you were seen for research that day. Other ways to get involved with research for Huntington's disease is to go to HD Trial Finder. The website is here. You can go to the Hdsa website and it'll guide you here. But basically, you can input your information and it'll help you kind of find clinical trials that might be appropriate for you. And research is important. Local trials are important. I'm always happy to help people find trials. If we're not a site, help you find a site that might be appropriate. I have a lot of patients that travel to other places to participate in clinical research, and I'm always supportive of that, so don't feel shy. And if you're here, you're obviously interested in research, so I really encourage you to participate in research in some way. Enroll is a great idea. This HD Trial Finder, HD Buzz is a wonderful research geared website which goes over all of the HD news if it's fit to print, and it does a really nice job of summarizing it in a way that we can understand a little bit better as lay people. So that is the end of my. Let's see if I can stop sharing my screen. There we go. And we can take questions. If you guys want to just, hang out and chat, that's fine too. But I'm happy to answer any questions about that sort of whirlwind of research, but I didn't want to go too much past our 8 o'clock time because it's my bedtime. No, I'm kidding.
If you don't mind, I have a question. This is Brian again.
Sure.
I didn't ever hear from the Roche Genentech whether or not it actually reduced the mutant HD protein. I don't think we actually said whether or not it reduced. And I'm worried that we're going to do all this research thinking, hey, if we reduce it, we've got it cured and we might be wasting our time. Have they said that or not?
So in the phase 1/2 trials, they did demonstrate that it did reduce the mutant Huntington protein. The question is sort of why did participants not improve symptomatically? Was it not enough? Was it the wrong time? I think that's going to be sort of they call it post hoc analysis. So the trial did not get halted by Roche because they don't really get to see the data in sort of the different groups. There's an independent board that monitors all the data. So I think now at this point, that's what's going to be happening for the next 6-ish months is they're going to pick this data apart and try to figure out. Frankly, they made a huge investment, so they're going to try to figure out if there's any way to salvage it, or if this is just okay, this is done. There wasn't any group that seemed to get any improvement. So my guess, and I am not privy to a heck of a lot of information, but is that they're going to try to find out whether there were any groups that really any signal towards a certain group that might benefit from the ASO. But we're still really learning kind of what happened there. There's on Hdsa, there's a webinar that you can watch, and I think they go over kind of things in a step-by-step fashion. Roche presented to Hdsa. Uh-oh, everyone's frozen. Is my internet off? Oh dear.
We
can hear you
still
and see
hear
Oh,
you.
good. Okay. Sorry. Everybody's faces froze and I was like, oh dear, this happens to me at least once a day where everybody disappears and I can't see anything. So yeah, HDSA has a really wonderful webinar that kind of goes over everything.
Yeah, I listened to the webinar. I just didn't hear them definitively say in phase 3 that it reduced the Huntington protein.
It's a good question. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming, based on the phase 1-2 data that it did, but I don't know. Honestly, I haven't had a chance to watch that entire. I've seen the synopsis, the written synopses, but I haven't watched their recent, the most recent update yet. Anybody else? Questions, concerns, comments, wishes? Oh, Rebecca, can we unmute? Okay, I can ask you to unmute. Okay, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I know how to do it.
You could, I wasn't sure if you could on your own on this, the way it's set up.
Is there like an itinerary or something for what the following meetings that you're going to have, the next meeting and the next one and the next one?
Yes, good question. So the next couple of meetings, is that okay if I take over, Megan, or do you?
Absolutely, go for it.
Okay, cool. So the next couple of meetings, great question, Rebecca. Armchair yoga, that'll happen on June 6th. And then the financial planning will be on July 12th. And then art therapy with Jen will be in August. So yes, and we will keep you guys in the loop about all of those.
And Rebecca, I believe this one we accidentally scheduled at 7 p.m., but the future ones will be 6 p.m. Mountain Time.
So the financial planning one that you mentioned in July 12th, what kind of who is going to be doing the speaking? Is there going to be like social workers or financial planning type?
Yeah, so HDSA has partnered, I believe it's with Washington Mutual, with the financial planners there, and they're planning to talk about sort of setting up wills and trusts, but also navigating the Social Security disability system. So I think they have a panel of folks. I have to double check, but this one's set up through the Huntington's Disease Society of America, so it's kind of geared toward the Huntington crowd. That helps answer the question. We had one with local financial planners last year when we did or 2 years ago now, when we did our in-person education day, and I thought that was pretty well received and helpful for a lot of folks.
So is it planning for like when they're sick enough that they have to go into nursing care 24 hours, or is
that
what are we planning?
And then also, I think partially like if someone needs to leave the workforce and like how to become a one-income family, navigating sort of the insurance quagmires, and then wills and trusts, and folks with chronic disease can be really helpful too, just so how to kind of set up those so you can kind of safeguard the money that you have.
Yeah, asset protection and things like that they cover.
Yeah, I would be interested in learning about that. So July 12th is the date.
July 12th.
6.
And we'll send out announcements again so you can sign up again and reminders ahead of time each time.
And, this Rebecca's put it in the chat here for you too.
Yeah.
For the dates.
And then we're hoping, as we can transition back into potentially more in-person stuff, hoping to also be able to have some virtual components. We haven't quite figured out how, we may be able to accomplish that. Because I do know, so many of our people cannot come to my building, on the second Monday of the month at 6 p.m., but they may want to come and be able to join in and listen in. And the support group, there's been so many iterations and trying to figure out how to make it work for so many different crowds. We have folks that, are part of the HD community that are pre-symptomatic and they're worried about that. We have folks that are symptomatic and are worried about that. We have care partners and they're worried about that. Or people are recently tested and they're concerned about that. So it's hard to make it into kind of a one-size-fits-all situation. there are a lot of online support groups that are run through HDSA for those different kind of subgroups, through HDO, other things. But I'm wondering, is this, if we want to keep things a lot more virtual, is doing sort of an educational thing every month the most useful? And I bet we could come up with 12 months of content of that easily, and that way people can kind of pick and choose what works, what interests them and what doesn't interest them. Does anyone have any opinions about
We also have the
support
national
groups in
convention.
general?
Oh, sorry. We also have the national convention coming
Yeah, go
up. It's
ahead.
just around the corner. And with that national convention, they always have support groups for all the different kinds of people. Just kind of like what Megan was saying, whether you're pre-symptomatic, symptomatic, or you're a caregiver, or you are, like me in your 20s. So it's amazing. And we'll also be doing more research updates and talking about those things. So I encourage all of you guys to sign up for the national convention. Even if you just go to one support group meeting, it is well worth, the time. And I always have a good time. So yes.
And the nice thing right now is everything is virtual. I believe it's free still, correct, Morgan? Yeah.
Yep. Everything is free. They always
nodding vigorously.
Yes.
I mean,
even before COVID, everything was free if you wanted to join virtually.
Yeah. It's an excellent, it's set up really for patients and families with lots of breakout areas. So like, if you're symptomatic and you want to go to hear about symptomatic treatments, you can go to that, but your loved one might be more interested in like how to support somebody who has irritability or, things like that. So there's usually lots of different tracks that are available for people to attend. So I find it, I think it's extremely useful. Go ahead, Brian. I think Brian looked like he was going to talk. But
that is going to be on June 9th. June 9th through I can't remember which day, but I'm going to post the link so you guys can register. I'm going to post that in the chat right now.
Great. I think we're all set unless there are more questions or comments. And I'm also happy if anybody wants to, shoot me an email if they have questions that they don't want to ask the larger group, or contact me separately if they have questions that they don't want to, raise your hand and talk about here. Great. All right. Shall we sign off for the evening?
Yeah, I just want to thank you. This is the event that I look forward to the most, and I think you do such a great job of explaining it on a level that we can all understand, and we totally appreciate what you're doing for us all. Megan, you're awesome.
Well, thank you so much. Oh, super, exciting also in other news is, as you may have known, we have been extremely short-staffed in the movement disorder neurology division at the University of Utah. So we hired 3 new doctors who are starting in late July / maybe August. So I'm hoping that we can really partner with one of them to greatly expand kind of the Huntington care and Center of Excellence and have it not be have it be a even greater experience, like take it to the next level. So as soon as we kind of get that all worked out, I will invite one of them to kind of come and meet you guys as well in kind of a larger venue. So that's to come.
Thank you, Megan.
So,
thank you
anyways,
so much.
Well, everybody have a great evening. Thank you.
Yeah,
take care, guys.
Amazing. Bye, everybody. See you guys soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Carl.
Hi.
How you doing there, handsome?
Okay.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi. Our usual education day gives a lot more information on about the disease and how it works and what it affects, and that's kind of what John was here for. He's Carl's friend, and he kind of wanted to understand the disease a little more. And
well,
so,
John, that I can help you with. That I can help you with. Go
What is
ahead.
the next meeting?
Oh, so the next one is going to be that financial planning meeting on July
I thought there was
June-
one in June. Isn't there a meeting in June?
The
Yeah.
yoga meeting is in June, June
Right.
7th. So you're welcome to join. I don't know how much disease specific information is going to be presented at that particular meeting. But thank you so much for coming and supporting your good friend. We love him.
Geez.
Yeah, he's been coming
Hdsa.
over. He's been coming over and spending some time with Carl, and he just Carl said something about how he didn't understand the illness, and so we were hoping that he could get a little more information from this, but it was more about
sorry, Rebecca.
Oh, it's okay. It was more about the trials and things that's going on. So that's good too.
I think probably your best bet is to go to hdsa.org, and there are actually a decent amount of like videos and like what symptoms occur and what kind of the disease progression looks like, because it's different for every person, but it kind of gives some basic overviews in that direction. But kind of in a global fashion, people with Huntington's disease, it's a genetically inherited disorder. If your parent has it, you have a 50% chance of inheriting it, and people have kind of a triad of symptoms. Some have more and some have less, but in general we see difficulties with movement, so those kind of wiggly wobbly dance-like movements are sort of this classic, and then people also have trouble with coordination, stiffness, walking and balance, so that's kind of the movement stuff. But also, some folks really have a lot of trouble with behavior and mood. So depression, anxiety, irritability is kind of the more psychiatric or behavioral pieces. And then some folks have more trouble with cognition. So memory and thinking, so they may think they're doing just fine, but in reality, they're really struggling. And then we also can see difficulties with like planning, multitasking, kind of following through. We call it executive function. So everybody with Huntington's has some of those. Sometimes people have none of the mood symptoms and a lot of the movement symptoms and some of the cognitive symptoms, and some have the movement's really not a big part of it. They may have a little bit, but it's really the behavioral and psychiatric pieces. And some it's really the cognitive pieces. And some people have kind of an even mixture. So it's really different person to person. And they can be super different, sibling to sibling or from parent to child as well. So if you met, some of Carl's relatives, they may have a completely different sort of symptom conglomeration as others. But overall, it progresses over time.
Yeah.
So that's hdsa.org.
.org. Yep.
Right.
Yep. And they've just got a lot of good information there.
Okay.
And that may be better than my little five minute introduction. But in general, it's what we call a chronic progressive neurodegenerative, meaning that the brain shows changes and loss over time, and eventually after between 10 and 30 years, so it's a pretty long disease course. It's fatal.
Right.
But it varies person to person, and it really would, also depend on how old people were when they first started having symptoms. Kind of how long that, if a person becomes symptomatic in their younger years, that 10 to 30 years is different than if someone becomes symptomatic in their 80s. That sort of 10 to 30 year progression.
Okay. Because my overall objective was to gain some insight into the disease itself.
Yeah.
And how it works and the effects that it has on the human body.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see what my dear friend goes through, and I mean, not that it matters, but I just want to do something. You want to understand
what he's dealing with. Yeah. Well, you're a good friend, it sounds like.
Well, I don't know. I try, he needs support, and it just doesn't seem to be there, and I feel bad for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We really appreciate John's visits. He comes over and visits with Carl. It's nice.
I think as a friend, that's kind of the most important thing, just to go and be there.
When I go over,
and ask Rebecca what she needs.
I usually end up talking their ears off and back on.
It's okay.
It's so nice
I
to,
mean, I think
No
a
boredom.
lot of our folks, I
yeah,
think just people appreciate the support and that you care, you know?
Yeah.
that
I
is.
think
so
Brian can
nice
speak
that
a little
you're
bit more from a
hanging in
family
there as a
perspective.
friend to them, John. It inspires me so much to see friends of the HD community show up to these meetings. Nothing inspires me more. Thank you for being a friend to them and looking out for
Well,
them.
Thank you.
For that. And thanks for
I just-
taking the time to research this. That's very kind of you. You're a good dude, I can tell.
Well, thank you. I love him like he's my own brother.
That's sweet.
That's why I go to see him.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
So,
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I
thank
think,
you, everybody, for all your parts.
It's good to
tonight.
see you guys.
okay.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Take care.
everybody.
I'm gonna check
Night.
out too.
Yeah.
Bye,
Talking with you
Christine.
guys.
I see your, I don't see your face, but I see your name.
Hey, Carl. I'll
Yeah.
see you Thursday at 3:00, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I look
Okay.
forward to it.
All right.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night, guys. Good night.
Good night, you guys.
Good night.
Take care.
All right.